Perfect life. Dark secret. This girl's got it all, but something's not right. Xian Hui was the envy of everyone. She was beautiful, top of her class, had all the hot guys chasing her, and a picture-perfect family. But no one knew the dark secret hidden behind her seemingly perfect life. And that secret was about to come out thanks to a new student. One day, a new girl named Su Yan arrived in class and walked up to Xian Hui's desk, asking if she remembered her. Xian Hui looked confused, and Su Yan seemed disappointed. She sat down and watched Xian Hui as she put her hair up, using a pen to hold it in place. This image reminded Su Yan of a past memory they shared. Xian Hui's dad was a famous lawyer who had won the Outstanding Talent Award for 4 years in a row. At school, Xian Hui was a star student, and 2 handsome boys were always protecting her. She never imagined that her perfect life would be completely turned upside down by Su Yan, the new girl. One day, while Xian Hui was reading a book, Su Yan suddenly came over and took the pen Xian Hui was using to put her hair up. When Xian Hui asked her what she was doing, Su Yan pulled out a box of matches and asked if she remembered it. Seeing the familiar box, Xian Hui's memory flashed back over 10 years. After her parents died, young Xian Hui had to live in an orphanage. She was often bullied by the other kids, until one night when Su Yan lit a match and told a scary story about how her father had killed her mother. This scared the other kids away. Su Yan was also abandoned by her parents and lived in the orphanage. The 2 girls, the same age and with similar backgrounds, quickly became best friends. Su Yan taught Xian Hui how to put her hair up with a pin and how to protect herself with matches. But those peaceful days didn't last long. One day, before Su Yan was adopted and left the orphanage, she gave Xian Hui her most prized possession, a box of matches. After that, Xian Hui was lonely again. Now the 2 girls reminisced about the past and asked about each other's current lives. Unlike Xian Hui, Su Yan said she was still living with her sisters at the orphanage. An injury from the past prevented her from being adopted. Xian Hui, on the other hand, had been adopted soon after and had become lucky, with a perfect and happy life. As she talked about the difference in their lives, Su Yan's voice was full of regret. Seeing Su Yan's sadness, Xian Hui took her hand and promised to help her find happiness again. Su Yan's gaze fell on the swan necklace on Xian Hui's backpack. She wished that Xian Hui would give it to her as a token of their renewed friendship. Although reluctant, Xian Hui finally agreed, unable to resist Su Yan's pleading eyes. That night, going home, Xian Hui couldn't stop thinking about Su Yan. She rarely lost focus like this, even during dinner. Back in her room, she wanted to call Su Yan, but stopped herself. To figure out how to deal with Su Yan, Xian Hui asked her father, the lawyer, for advice. She told him that she really wanted to be friends with Su Yan, but whenever she was around her, Xian Hui felt uncomfortable, unlike with her other friends. Su Yan seemed to carry a secret burden that Xian Hui couldn't figure out. Following her father's advice, Xian Hui decided to write a letter to Su Yan to express things she couldn't say out loud. But she still wasn't sure what to write. Unlike Xian Hui's princess-like life, Su Yan's situation wasn't good. One day, the shop Su Yan was working at suddenly closed down without paying her for the last month. To buy school supplies, she had to ask Xian Hui for money, but Xian Hui was wearing headphones and didn't hear her clearly. Su Yan thought she was being ignored and angrily demanded the money. Xian Hui was a bit scared and promised to bring Su Yan the money the next day. That night, Su Yan calculated her expenses for the new school and complained to her sisters in the dorm that the school was too expensive. Her sisters were also helpless. Remember, Su Yan had transferred to this school because she knew Xian Hui was there. Now, she felt like Xian Hui was uncomfortable around her, and their friendship seemed to have stopped at childhood. The next day, Yang Ho, one of Xian Hui's best friends and one of her admirers, approached Su Yan and gave her money, warning her not to bully Xian Hui again. He had witnessed Su Yan asking Xian Hui for money. The swan necklace that Xian Hui was wearing was a birthday gift from Yang Ho. However, this act seemed to hurt Su Yan's pride. She kicked Yang Ho to the ground, threw the money back at him, and, in front of all the students, asked Xian Hui if she looked like a beggar. After school, Su Yan was still upset about what happened. She saw Xian Hui's mother arrive to pick her up, and Yang Ho also got in the car with them. Comparing her unfortunate life to theirs, Su Yan felt so disappointed. At that moment, 2 other girls called Su Yan over, expressing envy for Xian Hui and wanting to bring Su Yan into their group to fight against this perfect girl. They even said they wanted to be friends with Su Yan, but she rejected them outright. The next day, Yang Ho met with Su Yan privately to apologize for his irrational behavior the day before. Looking at the almost perfect guy in front of her, Su Yan felt a little flustered. Similarly, after the incident with the money, Xian Hui also apologized to Su Yan and invited her to hang out. During their conversation, Su Yan learned that Xian Hui had asked Yang Ho to apologize to her. Thinking about this, Su Yan's face filled with disappointment. That afternoon, Su Yan went to find another boy, Hyeon Yu. Like Kyung Ho, he was one of Seon Hui's best friends and secretly liked her. But unlike Kyung Ho, who was straightforward, Hyeon Yu always kept his feelings hidden. Su Yan saw through his feelings and asked if he had confessed to Seon Hui. He shook his head. His family only owned a laundromat, which was completely different from Kyung Ho's and Seon Hui's wealthy families. So even in front of his best friend Kyung Ho, he had never admitted his feelings for Seon Hui. But Su Yan encouraged him, saying that you can't choose your parents or your background. Compared to growing up in an orphanage like her, his situation was much better. That night, as Seon Hui was coming home from her after-school classes, Su Yan called her to a secluded corner, saying she had something to tell her. Once they were alone, Su Yan took off her wig, revealing half of her head burned. The cost of treating the burns was very expensive, which was why Su Yan couldn't be adopted successfully. Seeing the exposed scars, Seon Hui was both shocked and scared, but Su Yan came closer and recounted the terrifying event from the night before she was about to be adopted. Back then, young Seon Hui thought her best friend would be leaving, and she'd be alone again. She secretly lit the match that Su Yan had given her, and the fire spread quickly, burning down the entire orphanage. Su Yan was burned in the fire. It seemed fate had favored Seon Hui. While Su Yan was in the hospital, she was adopted and became the lucky girl with a happy life like she has today. On the other hand, Su Yan was abandoned by the couple who had planned to adopt her. After she was released from the hospital, a local congressman held a support day for children who had been victims of disasters and gave Su Yan a wig. When she was alone, young Su Yan angrily took off the wig, threw it to the ground, and stomped on it because she didn't want it. But a moment later, she picked it back up and burst into tears in despair. From that moment on, Su Yan's life was consumed by anger and a despair she couldn't shake. She asked Seon Hui if she could imagine how miserable her life had been since then. Faced with Su Yan's painful past, Seon Hui couldn't hold back tears and kept apologizing. But at this point, apologies meant nothing. Su Yan put her wig back on and said that Seon Hui owed her, and she would get it back little by little. That night, thinking about Su Yan's pain, Seon Hui tossed and turned, unable to sleep. She remembered her father's advice about writing a letter and decided to wake up and write down the things she couldn't say out loud. The next morning, Su Yan found Seon Hui's letter under her desk. In it, Seon Hui wrote that she had no idea Su Yan had been burned and thought they had both been adopted. Seon Hui promised to spend her whole life making up for Su Yan and hoped they could go back to being the close friends they used to be. After reading the letter, 2 other female students went to Su Yan and laughed, asking her what she had said to Seon Hui the previous day, curious about their past. But Su Yan wasn't one to be bullied easily. She quickly gave the 2 girls a lesson, threatening that if they dared to bully Seon Hui again, she wouldn't let them get away with it. Su Yan was touched by Seon Hui's heartfelt letter. After class, she gently called Seon Hui over to thank her. Seon Hui smiled gently, her hopes for their friendship blooming again. On the way home, the 2 girls who had been bullied by Su Yan called some boys to get revenge. When Su Yan was unable to fight back, Kyung Ho suddenly appeared like a savior, helping her drive the boys away. Hyeon Yu was there too. After the boys ran off, a police siren sounded. Kyung Ho quickly grabbed Su Yan's hand and pulled her away. Su Yan's heart fluttered again. The 2 boys had secretly followed and protected her all the way home out of concern for her. When she was safe, Su Yan's gaze fell on the swan necklace in his hand, the gift Kyung Ho had given Seon Hui. Remembering that Kyung Ho liked Seon Hui, Su Yan unconsciously clenched her hand. The next day, Seon Hui and Kyung Ho were using their new phones to take photos. Hyeon Yu wanted to take a picture with Seon Hui, but Kyung Ho jokingly refused. At that moment, Su Yan arrived and offered to take a picture of the 3 of them. Then Su Yan wanted to take a picture with Kyung Ho, but Seon Hui, innocently unaware of Su Yan's feelings, also raised her hand in a V sign for the photo. That evening, Seon Hui invited Su Yan over for dinner at her house. Looking at Seon Hui's luxurious home and her loving parents, Su Yan's heart filled with envy. Seon Hui wanted Su Yan to stay the night, but she refused and left quickly. Everything Seon Hui had was what Su Yan longed for, but could never have. One day at school, Su Yan overheard a conversation between Kyung Ho and Hyeon Yu. Kyung Ho planned to confess his feelings to Seon Hui, but Hyeon Yu mentioned Su Yan, thinking that Kyung Ho had feelings for her. Kyung Ho immediately denied it, saying that the only person he liked was Seon Hui and that he didn't care what Su Yan thought. Hearing this, Su Yan's anger flared up. When she returned to class, she walked straight up to Seon Hui and said that if Kyung Ho planned to talk to her today, she shouldn't listen. Seon Hui didn't understand, but Su Yan repeated herself loudly, threatening to cut off their friendship if Seon Hui listened to Kyung Ho. That afternoon, after school, Kyung Ho did come to find Seon Hui and said he had something to talk to her about. Remembering Su Yan's warning, Seon Hui made up an excuse and rushed away. As she was almost home, she remembered that she hadn't given Soo-yeon her study materials. She rushed back out, but when she got there, she saw Soo-yeon walking into Kyung-ho's house. In Kyung-ho's living room, balloons and rose petals were scattered everywhere. It was a scene he had prepared for his confession to Seon Hui. Witnessing this, Soo-yeon's heart filled with envy. She told Kyung-ho not to bother with this confession because it was sure to fail. Seon Hui stood outside Kyung-ho's house, waiting, but Soo-yeon never came out. She was about to leave when she suddenly heard an argument from inside, and then Soo-yeon's wig fell to the ground. Seeing Seon Hui, Soo-yeon got angry, saying that Seon Hui had promised not to listen to Kyung-ho today. In a fit of rage, Soo-yeon pulled out a knife, believing that her unfortunate life was all Seon Hui's fault. She then lunged at Seon Hui with the knife. In that moment of danger, Kyung-ho stepped in front of Seon Hui to protect her and was stabbed. He fell to the ground. As a result, Kyung-ho collapsed, and it seemed like a tragedy had begun. After Kyung-ho's death, Seon Hui, covered in blood, rushed home. When she saw her daughter covered in blood, her mother was stunned. Seon Hui stammered, telling her mother that she had killed Kyung-ho, but she didn't mention Soo-yeon. Seon Hui's mother seemed oddly calm. She asked her daughter for details about the scene, such as the weapon and the location of the body. Seon Hui remembered that she had left her phone and study materials at Kyung-ho's place. She then decided to confess, but her mother wouldn't allow it. She comforted Seon Hui and told her to leave everything to her. The first thing her mother did was tell Seon Hui to take a bath and change clothes. While Seon Hui was in the bath, her mother put sleeping pills in her milk and gave it to her. After Seon Hui drank the milk, her mother said she would go to Kyung-ho's house to check if he was still alive. Seon Hui mentioned confessing again, but her mother threatened that if Seon Hui wanted to make her an accomplice, then she could go ahead. Because of her mother's words, Seon Hui gave up on confessing. That night, she fell into a deep sleep, and when she woke up, she found her phone and study materials that she had left at Kyung-ho's house neatly placed on her desk. Stepping out of her room, she saw her mother busy in the kitchen, and her father was helping. The family atmosphere was as warm as always, as if last night was just a bad dream. While Seon Hui tried to reassure herself, the TV news reported about the fire that had happened the previous night at Kyung-ho's house, claiming that his whole family of 3 had died in their sleep. Looking at the images of the fire on the news and seeing her parents act as if nothing had happened, Seon Hui suddenly realized that they might have helped her cover up Kyung-ho's death. The next day, the police began investigating the fire at Kyung-ho's house and discovered that it had started in his room. The cause could be the paint thinner belonging to his father, an artist, which may have sparked the fire. During the investigation, the police noticed Soo-yeon's anxiousness when she appeared in the crowd. Her fearful eyes when she met the police's gaze made them begin to suspect that it could be arson, and decided to investigate the people closest to Kyung-ho. Soo-yeon frantically called Seon Hui, but she didn't answer. Faced with dozens of calls from Soo-yeon, Seon Hui hid in her room, holding her head, consumed by fear over Kyung-ho's death. The next day, Soo-yeon arrived at Seon Hui's house, looking anxious. She had also noticed the fire at Kyung-ho's house and suspected Seon Hui. Seon Hui was tense and didn't respond. Soo-yeon reminded her that they had agreed that Seon Hui would take the blame for killing Kyung-ho. When Seon Hui remained silent, Soo-yeon took off her wig, revealing half of her burned head, and her eyes went wild as she grabbed Seon Hui. To Soo-yeon, this was what Seon Hui owed her. Not stopping there, Soo-yeon also demanded that Seon Hui turn herself in because she believed Seon Hui's father, a lawyer, would help her daughter resolve any trouble. But Seon Hui cried and refused, fearing that this would disappoint her mother. Seeing this, Soo-yeon yelled at Seon Hui, calling her thick-skinned and saying that she had taken everything from her and still wasn't satisfied. Then she threatened to call the police. As she opened the door, Seon Hui's father was already standing outside. With a polite and friendly smile that didn't match the situation, he asked Soo-yeon where she and his daughter were going. He even offered to take them. Soo-yeon quickly thanked him and left hastily. Passing by the police station, Soo-yeon hesitated. She took the swan necklace from her pocket, and her memory flashed back to the day of the incident. That day, when Soo-yeon went to Kyung-ho's house, he was preparing a surprise party to confess his feelings to Seon Hui, and had asked Soo-yeon to text Seon Hui, reminding her to come over after her after school classes. Soo-yeon's heart was filled with envy. She lied, saying that Seon Hui didn't like Kyung-ho, and that the swan necklace was something Seon Hui didn't want, so she had given it to her. But Kyung-ho didn't believe it. He believed that Seon Hui wasn't that kind of person, and asked Soo-yeon to return the necklace. Soo-yeon refused, and Kyung-ho started to approach her, demanding that she give it back. He even blamed her for bullying Seon Hui. Feeling helpless in her situation, Soo-yeon cried and ruined the party that Kyung-ho had worked so hard to prepare. Kyung-ho tried to stop her, but during the argument, Su-yeon's wig fell off, revealing the secret she had always hidden. Her pride was deeply hurt. In a fit of anger, she blamed Seon-hui, saying that she had made her life so miserable. Remembering the events of that night and looking at the swan necklace in her hand, Su-yeon temporarily put aside her plans to report to the police. Just then, a black car suddenly stopped behind her. The person in the car saw her and Su-yeon felt reassured enough to get in. That night, waking up in the car, she was suddenly attacked by the person sitting beside her, who used a hammer and blood gushed out. While the attacker searched the trunk, Su-yeon ran for her life. Meanwhile, Seon-hui asked her mother about the fire at Kyung-ho's house. The night before, when she had gone to Kyung-ho's house, she had left her phone and study materials there, but when she woke up, everything was neatly placed on her desk in her room. Facing her daughter's question, Seon-hui's mother, with a mysterious expression, insisted that she didn't know anything about what happened at Kyung-ho's house. Remembering her happy moments with Kyung-ho, Seon-hui felt both heartbroken and guilty. She searched for news about the fire online, and couldn't help crying when she thought about how good things would have been if nothing had happened. The next day, Hyun-yu went to find Seon-hui to attend Kyung-ho's funeral together. Seeing his portrait, Seon-hui felt very uneasy, to the point that she couldn't stand and collapsed to the ground. Hyun-yu took care of her, and just then, Seon-hui's father, a lawyer, appeared. He was worried about his daughter. He thanked Hyun-yu and took her home by car. On the way, her father comforted her, saying that time would heal all wounds, and he promised to help her through this difficult time with her mother. After her father comforted her, Seon-hui felt calmer. However, when they arrived home, she saw 2 police officers waiting at the door. Her father told her to stay in the car, while he went down to deal with them. Seon-hui tried to avoid the police officer's gaze, but while sitting in the car, she discovered the swan necklace she had given to Su-yeon. Looking at her father, who was still as kind as always, Seon-hui suddenly felt uneasy. He invited the police officers inside, and they began to question her about Kyung-ho. Seon-hui just said that she didn't know anything, and when the police mentioned that they couldn't reach Su-yeon, Seon-hui nervously looked at her father. Her hands unconsciously intertwined as she tried to hide her anxiety. At the same time, Seon-hui instinctively chose to lie and didn't mention that Su-yeon had been to her house before disappearing. After the police left, her father praised Seon-hui for keeping calm and not revealing that Su-yeon had been to their house, saying she had done a great job. He put his hand on her shoulder, still gentle as always, and said that she didn't need to worry because whatever happened, he would always be on her side. Seon-hui felt afraid, shrank back and ran to her room. Watching his daughters retreating back, the father's expression seemed to become serious and unpredictable. Inside her room, Seon-hui opened her phone and saw numerous messages she had sent Su-yeon, but they still remained unanswered. She called her, but the call wouldn't connect. Looking at the warm family picture on her desk, Seon-hui had a bad feeling. To prevent something bad from happening, she quickly contacted Hyun-yu and asked for Su-yeon's address. Arriving at the address, she encountered Su-yeon's roommate, who told her that Su-yeon hadn't been home for days. That night, returning home, Seon-hui remembered the last time Su-yeon came to her house, and since then, she had completely lost contact with her. Adding to the fact that she had seen the swan necklace in her father's car, Seon-hui began to fear that her worries were coming true. Just then, a man called her over. He said he was related to Seon-hui's father, and that he had known her since she was a child. Before leaving, the mysterious man leaned close to Seon-hui's ear and told her to be careful of her parents. Seon-hui was shocked, while her father stood on the upper floor, watching the man with a tense expression. Meanwhile, Officer Shin, who had been to Seon-hui's house, still believed that Kyung-ho's death was no ordinary accident. Although his superiors had reprimanded him for acting on his intuition when the autopsy report arrived, confirming that Kyung-ho's death wasn't from the fire, but from a stab wound from a knife, the officer was even more certain that the fire had been intentionally started by the killer.